how good this C63 Coupe is. Hey guys, and welcome back to RBR, and we're in a sunny Munich at the moment. The surroundings here are absolutely gorgeous. I want you to have a look at the lake here. We're very near to Austria, so you've got all the mountains as well. And in this stylish surrounding, we've got a very stylish car. This is the brand new CLA, and it replaces what I felt was a rather lackluster predecessor in something that was trying to set style. And in fact, I think this car goes so forward in style that it could possibly even knock spots off the CLS. So before I dive into this particular model too much, I want to look at that factor first. Now, of course, Mercedes were the creator of the original four-door coupe, and that came via the Vision CLS back in 2003. And that translated into the eventual CLS. And that banana Mercedes, as everyone was calling then, it was a revolution. It was a pillarless door coupe with all the luxuries that you would get in an S-Class in a E-Class size four-door coupe. Now, that was something pretty amazing. And even to this day, that car really is the design icon as far as four-door coupes go. After that followed the next model of that car, and that wasn't perhaps as handsome or elegant, but it was going for a more kind of aggressive look, I think. And you can see with the extra exaggerated lines on the side and that so-called Ponton rear end above the rear wheel arch, which in my opinion worked better than the E-Class of that time. It was a pretty aggressive and mean looking car, and inside again it was different enough to E-Class to stand on its own. I just didn't like those lipstick like rear end lights. And at round about this time, the compact sector for Mercedes-Benz was being rethought completely. And this was about the time of that new A-Class that really kicked things off for a more youthful Mercedes-Benz. And that compact sector had two goals to it. One was to reduce the average age of the buyer who's buying Mercedes-Benz, and the second was to pull buyers from other brands. And to do that, they had the A-Class, but they also had the CLA, which was a smaller four-door coupe. Now, this goal was achieved by Mercedes. In fact, apparently 70% of CLA sales in the USA were from people outside of the brand, and of course the age reduced as well. And just generally, the public opinion of Mercedes at that time was so much better than it used to be in the past, because all the young people generally were interested in this car that was that much more interesting looking. But to me, that old CLA, it just looked frumpy. It just looked like a car that was under-designed from day one. It seemed to me like the track and the wheelbase was a lot smaller than the shell that they'd put on top of it. It never quite sat right to me. And I've always commended Mercedes-Benz for making and designing cars that always sit properly on these wheels. And that was the one exception, other than its fully filled out AMG versions, where I just thought, this car doesn't look right. Anyway, fast forward to today. Back then, the CLS was the better looking four-door coupe, and you kind of felt like Mercedes were almost pushing you to buy that car. Now, in today's market, it's a totally different game, because the CLA has got controversial, sorry, the CLS rather, the new one, has got controversial design. The front end is basically a copy-paste of the new A-Class. In fact, it's so much more so that this new CLA, despite being the four-door coupe of the A-Class, has got a completely different front end, whereas the CLS hasn't. It looks like an A-Class from the front. And then from the rear, oh dear. This is one area that I think very few of us have really gotten to terms with. Yeah, the AMG one looks good. That's because of all the AMG bits. But really, those rear lights, it's not doing it any favors. But then enters this, the brand new CLA. And I wrongly assumed when I first saw this car that it was exactly the same as the A sedan, just with a different roofline and the rear hatchback. But this car is actually completely different all around. First of all, you'll notice, if I compare it to the normal A-Class, it's got a completely different front end to it. The lights are a completely different design. You've got totally different air intakes on the front. The shape of the grille is completely different. You've got power domes on the front. The whole front of the car looks wider. And in fact, it's actually a different shaped car to its predecessor. And let me qualify that for you. It's slightly lower. It's significantly wider on the tracks, which was my main problem with the old car. So the front and the rear track is the part where the car has grown the most. It's longer as well. The greenhouse has been pushed back, so the front bonnet is actually longer. And to me, it's that three-quarter view that really starts to get to you. The old CLA was kind of over-designed on that side profile. You had a lot of cuts going on. This one, they removed the lines like Gordon Wagner loves to talk about. So you've got the wheel arch and you've just got one straight line that goes all the way to the strong shoulder on the rear of the car, that Coke bottle as they like to call it. And it just makes the car muscular. It kind of gives it that AMG GT coupe type line. And then you look at the rear of the car. How much better does this rear look than the CLS? It's just the way the lights are done. Everything just seems to work a little bit better. I just feel like it hasn't been restricted in its design. This is the best that Mercedes-Benz at the moment could make a compact four-door coupe look. That's what I wanted with the original CLA. That's what they've done with this. They've not held themselves back. It looks as good as it could possibly look. And that's always how a car should be designed, in my opinion. Public response has been awesome from what I've seen on Instagram as well, with the majority of people preferring this over the CLS for that reason. And it's for this reason that I really think that this has kind of overtaken the CLS, which has gone a bit safe with its design, maybe because of the GT four-door. And now it sits as probably the most stylish four-door coupe. But the case for that gets even better because unlike the CLS, which no longer has a shooting brake, this car of course has a shooting brake version as well, which is equally gorgeous. It looks absolutely fantastic, and of course that's coming out in the future. Now you guys know I love to talk about the future of cars. So let's talk about the future of the CLA. You know what I'm going to get to. Next coming up is going to be the CLA 35. Not a huge amount of difference in looks, but we know that it's going to have those hand-me-downs from the last 45 generation of the same 4MATIC system, the 7-speed gearbox. And we found, well, actually, when we go on the drive for this, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the CLA 35 and what that could mean for this. Now, the next bit, which is really interesting, we've seen new spy shots of the CLA 45S or whatever it might be called roaming around, and this is the full fat version. Now, it's interesting because the CLS doesn't get a full fat AMG, does it? It stops at the 53. Whereas this CLA does get a full fat 45 version. And as you can see, it looks like a mini AMG GT4 door. Literally, the lower half of the car is almost identical to the GT4 door. It's just going to look absolutely stunning. And now, of course, you're going to have something quite special in terms of the drivetrain. Don't think it's just going to be like the old car, because it's not. Those of you who've seen my prototype drive of the AMG A45, if you haven't, link is down below. That car had, just like the E63 and the GT4 door, 4MATIC plus with switchable rear wheel drive, so a drift mode in that car. Now imagine, whereas the M2 has been reigning supreme in my opinion, for the compact segment, now you've got a CLA 45 coupe with switchable rear wheel drive as rumoured with a drift mode to finally give the M2 some competition. I'm really excited about that car. And that means you're also going to have a shooting brake version, which we've seen running around as well, which is going to be the only full fat AMG shooting brake that you can buy from the entire range. So this is a really important car for Mercedes-Benz. As you can tell, I'm pretty enamored with the design of the car, the outside, maybe because I really didn't like the design of the previous car. But when you get inside and you see the tech in this car, the whole proposition becomes that much more enticing. So let's have a look at the inside now. Now, while the interior of this new CLA is lovely, especially in a two-tone spec like this, I hope we get something like that in the UK. Is it wishful thinking? Probably, knowing MB UK, but there's maybe a chance. This is how good it could look, right? Sorry, the car was on. Anyway, so the interior is lovely. It looks great, especially when you've got two-tone. The new A-Class just generally is just one of the best car interiors out there anyway, but that's not what makes this compelling, as I was saying earlier. What makes it compelling is MBUX, the new system inside these cars. And it's a system that you at the moment only get, well, this particular one, the updated one, you only get in this CLA and the brand new GLE. And essentially, I'm not going to mince words, it basically means that this car is more advanced than the S-Class, the E-Class, the AMG GT four-door, the G-Wagon, you name it. Other than the GLE, this is the most advanced Mercedes-Benz system that you can have at the moment. Now, I just said Mercedes-Benz, and Mercedes-Benz has woken up. Hello, Mercedes.
How can I help you?
Tell me a joke.
Sorry, my engineers were Germans.
Now, that's all great. Voice commands are great. But this system, as you might have seen in my A-Class review, if you haven't, go and have a look at it, because I go into major depth on MBUX on it. It's changed the game as how you interact with a car, whether it's doing navigation to a new place, or trying to change ambient lighting, without actually having to go into the system. You can do so many things by just asking Mercedes to do it for you. And that's what makes this thing good. So you've got a mixture between buttons, touch operation on your steering wheel, touch operation on the touchpad, touch operation over here, and voice command. But you see the CLA and the GLE take it a step forward with MBUX interior assist. Now that is a fancy way of saying that they've installed cameras up here which are watching the driver and the passenger. And these cameras do some very intelligent things. So example, if I go into the home here, and before I've even touched the screen, it can see where my hand is pointing at, and it's highlighting, for example, navigational radio. So then I go across actually touching it, and I go into, say, energizing comfort, seat kinetics, and it's already picked up the fact that it's the driver doing it, so it's highlighting the driver's seat. So when I've started it, it's not started the passenger's one. Of course, if I jumped into the passenger side, it will start doing the passenger seat one. But it's not just that. Let's say it's late night and you're trying to find something in the passenger footwell that someone dropped earlier. It will detect that, turn the lights on for the passenger side, and help you look for whatever you're looking for. That's how intelligent this thing is. And it goes beyond that. The first person to activate the car saying, "Hey Mercedes," is the one that the car remembers is the one who's controlling the car. So if anyone else says it after that, it's not going to pay attention to that person. It's only going to pay attention to the main user, the first user. So it's getting more and more intelligent. And I feel I'm going to miss it more and more in the cars that don't have this system. But now I want to show you, as you're driving, how all these systems help you. And especially for me, I'm here, it's the first time I'm in Munich. And you can see now how MBUX is going to help me navigate a place that I've never been to before. So guys, we are currently in the CLA 220 4MATIC. Now, I can't really talk about the suspension of this car, which is what I'd like to do most about a more comfortable version of a Mercedes-Benz, because the German roads are absolutely flawless. So I can't really tell you, so, you know, for example, in the UK or Italy, what this car would be like on rougher roads. If it's anything like the A180D I lived with for a year, it's going to be a lot better than the previous A-Class, but still not quite on that E-Class level. Bumps would unhinge the A-Class. So I think we're going to have to wait for a test on UK roads, perhaps with a fruitier version of this car, to see what it's like in terms of suspension. I must once again reiterate just how gorgeous Munich is to do a test like this. Never been here before, but it's absolutely wonderful. But the fact that I've never been here was quite daunting, because this is the first ever trip I've done in Europe where I haven't got a passenger. I'm not going in convoy with some friends, as us petrol heads often do. So it's a completely new place. It's a strange place. There's no support, but I've got a really good support passenger with me, and that is MBUX. It is absolutely brilliant. And I want to show you why. There's one particular feature that has been so good for a place that you don't know where to go and how to navigate, and that is the augmented reality navigation. Now that's also in A-Class and the rest of the compact family. It's also in the brand new GLE. And essentially what happens is, when you sometimes get confused coming to a junction or a roundabout as to which exit you need to take to maintain yourself on the right route, the camera props up here, as you can see now, and gives you a virtual reality blue arrow as to which road you need to turn down on that exact road, and it gets it right every single time. And where I've been a little bit apprehensive going on these scenic routes that Mercedes-Benz have chosen, now I can drive with confidence in a completely strange place, because augmented reality navigation tells me exactly where I need to go and allows me to remain, at least in that part of the journey, stress-free. Right now is a good example of why I would miss MBUX in any other car. Now I'm running late, as you do on every single press drive. You're pushed for time, you've got limited time to film things and do things. I want to go straight to the airport, don't want any of this scenic route nonsense. All I have to say is, "Hey MB, take me straight to Munich airport." I don't need to mess around with typing in stuff here while I'm running late, while I want to be driving. All I need to do is say those words. It's not a pre-scripted line. You can say it in any way you want, and the navigation will just start. That's all there is to it. Now, before you write off this CLA 220 4MATIC as being a boring car, I've stuck into sport mode, and I just want you to hear this car, just for a minute. Can you hear that rumble? It's kind of like that sound you get from the 35s at the higher revs. It really gives it a purposeful sound. I'll be honest with you, I thought I was going to be bored to death driving this, but in sport mode, it really has a nice sound to it. I think the CLA 220 4MATIC could be a real sweet spot if you don't want to shell out for the more expensive AMG when it eventually comes out. It's genuinely fun, and the 250 non-AMG line I was driving doesn't sound like this. CLA 220 4MATIC in AMG line, way more exciting than I thought it would be. Definitely try this out because I think it's going to surprise you, this engine configuration. And then you jump out of this into a CLS which costs double or triple the price of this car. You're kind of left wondering, what is it you're paying for in the CLS? Yes, you definitely have better suspension in the CLS. You've definitely got, you know, probably a more luxurious interior, but this is a very modern interior, and it comes linked to that MBUX, which to my mind is irreplaceable. And then, in my opinion, the outside of the car is just frankly better looking. But things get worse then if we consider what's coming up, and that is the CLA 35 that I want to concentrate on. Let's forget about the 45 for a minute. I saw a really good series on Instagram of stories that Chris Harris was doing about the top selling cars in the UK, and one theme that was running through his stories were how expensive these cars are becoming, like C-classes being 40 odd grand and Polos being 30 odd grand, etc. Now, when you've got a car like this CLA, which is probably going to wind up being mid to late 30,000s, you could probably end up going for the CLA 35 with some ease because everyone's going to lease the car. And that is still going to cost you half as much as, say, the entry-level diesel CLS. Now, you're wondering, that's true of every car. You pay a bit more, you get an AMG. But when you compare it specifically to the CLS, you've got at the top of the CLS ladder the CLS 53, which is a really refined car, but we found the A35 in our videos to be the most AMG out of all the entry-level non-63 cars, because it was closest related to the A45, it had the loudest exhaust. So when you have a CLA 35 with a more fruity exhaust than the 53, probably more agile because it's smaller, with a much, much superior infotainment system, more superior than S-Class, and a much better looking exterior in my opinion, yet for half the price of an entry-level CLS diesel. That is a compelling proposition. And I find it more compelling now driving this CLA 220 4MATIC on these perfect German roads. It really feels quite agile. It's got that coupe handling that the A-Class hatchback just doesn't have. And this is where I really want to see how the CLA 45 takes on the M2. I'm quite surprised. There's definitely a differentiation in how sporty the CLA is in its character of handling, in the way it sounds, compared to the A-Class. They've definitely made a differentiation here. And I think you really need to drive it to savor that. I'm hoping that the sound you've heard in this review gives you an indication of that fact. So I just want to leave you with how interesting this 220 AMG line is with the 4MATIC, how interesting it sounds, how compelling that CLA 35 could be given this, and given just how much this car gives you bang for buck wise and style wise compared to the much more expensive CLS. It's a really, really enjoyable car, and I really like how now the CLA has a really different character to the A-Class hatchback. And that's why I want you to take away from this. There is a genuine reason to have less headroom in the back, to go for style and to go for a coupe shape over the A-Class. So guys, thank you so much for watching this first look and a quick blast in the new CLA coupe. Hope to look at the AMG version soon. If you enjoyed the video, please do like, subscribe and share it, and I'll see you again soon.